Hi, I'm Ray Pointer,
And I'm Will Pointer.
and together we're the founders of ResearchWise AI. And today we're going to be having a chat about downloading AI models onto your local computer. So, Will, I just said AI models. What are we talking about?
So we hear a lot of different terms when it comes to AI models these days, things like LLM and GPT. I would say not to worry too much about the different terms. In these cases, we're going to be downloading LLMs, but AI is the bracket, the umbrella term that can cover all these different technologies. So if in doubt, use the term AI.
So, most people, perhaps if they've used an AI model, will have logged in to the internet and they'll be using that and got all sorts of concerns about data going backwards and forwards. What do we mean by downloading it onto your own computer?
Absolutely. Well, as a lot of people will know, that modern AI technology uses quite a lot of computer power. And therefore, most of AI models that you hear about, ChatGPT, OpenSeek, and Llama and so forth, are often run in the cloud by big tech companies, Meta, Amazon, and so forth. But there is an option with some models, some versions of models, to download it onto your computer like you would in the old days anyway, Microsoft Word, and you would perhaps with a computer game, and run it on your computer instead of running it in the cloud. And this it can have an advantage on performance. For instance, it can work even when you don't have internet or reliable internet. But it also allows you to control what is happening with the data and the program more.
So we hear about how big these models are, millions, billions of pieces of information. How can they fit on my computer? Oh, when we say computer, do I have to have some great big server or a regular computer?
So it depends. Is probably the short answer. Um, if you, there are models in which you would need, if not a supercomputer, certainly a super expensive computer to run. And these are not the models we're going to be talking about. Um, Once a model has been created, the creators can go through processes of distilling and miniaturization to create smaller versions of the models, which are less performant, less create less good quality, but still do a much more efficient create quality more efficiently. So in an example, you could go from 70 billion parameters down to 4 billion parameters. And in that, they will lose a couple of percent, 3, 4, 5% on performance in different areas. But of course, you've reduced it by over 90% in size.
Okay, so I took some of Will's advice and I took a program called LM Studio. I don't know if there are others around, but it's free and it's easy. I loaded that on my Mac, and then I brought down one of the Llama models. They're made by Meta, who owns Facebook, and I now run that on my machine. I was running something airplane the other day, for example. No internet, but I'm running a large language model on my computer. Seems fast enough. I mean, it's not one of the biggest models out there, um, but it's quite interesting.
Absolutely. And I find that particularly interesting as well, where you talk about using it on the plane, that quite often if I've been working on a plane and I've forgotten a little bit of documentation about how to do something in a software language. Oh, how do you use that function again? Or what is the rules around this? Could I need an explainer to remind me what's the difference in a data controller and a data processor, and where is the line when I'm jotting this email that I would like to send on landing. And of course, the LLM is a fantastic repository of knowledge. We can't always trust its knowledge. We should take it with a pinch of salt and double check it. But it is this um, multiple gigabyte copy of just general knowledge where you might be able to ask it a question and it provide an answer without the internet.
So if we take all the fuss recently, there's been about DeepSeek, the new LLM from China, that it seems to be a lot cheaper. Its reasoning one seems to be really smart, but most people I've spoken to are really reluctant to put anything sensitive, any confidential data, any client data into there, even if they're happy to use Gemini, even if they're happy to use ChatGPT. Um, is an alternative to download it, and what makes that secure?
Absolutely. So, DeepSeek advertises itself as an open source model. I think you and I would both agree that an open weighting model is probably a better term. And this means, though, that you can download the model onto your computer. You can't download ChatGPT onto your computer. You can download their software, but the model itself, the AI itself, is still running on their servers. But in the case of DeepSeek and a few other models, you can download the model itself onto your computer. This comes with, although this won't change the way it executes, or it might lower its abilities, its intellect, it won't change the rules around it. So, for instance, if the DeepSeek that you use via the internet doesn't want to talk about certain topics, the DeepSeek you install on a computer still will not want to talk about certain topics. But it comes with the advantage that you can seal it off from the rest of the world at that point. So you can be sure that whatever you are discussing with it is not being sent over the internet. And that can be useful not just when the model has come from China, but actually models that perhaps are being produced by Musk or Russia or even Microsoft or Apple, depending if you look at their corporate histories.
Yeah, so we can bring it down, we can make it secure, and it's really interesting and it seems quite clever to do it. Is there really much point for most companies or organizations to see the future of their using of these AI models as being local? Because most things are going in the cloud.
I think most things that go in the cloud is more complex than that. Lots of things are also now more happening on your device as well, where they wouldn't before. When you are buying a new phone or laptop, they are, part of this is marketing, of course, but companies are pushing the fact that there's more neural cores and things like this because we know image recognition used to happen much more in the cloud. Now it happens much more on device because we want it even when our internet is poor. Plus, we need, there is running it on device is the ultimate distributed computing solution from an engineer's perspective. Would I like to have hundreds of servers that I look after, or would I like to use people's thousands of devices instead that I don't have to pay for and don't have to worry in the same way about data security? Um, although I have to worry about it in different ways. Um, but to come back to your question, I think there is going to be versions of AI computing that it stays in the cloud probably, and then there's going to be versions that move onto the device. And this will be, if we look at, let's say, market research data collection in, well, I was going to say certain parts of the world, more rural parts of India, Africa, whatever, but actually more rural parts of Scotland and Cornwall. It would also be true that if your device relied on certain AI to do filtering or suggest next questions or whatever it was, and it didn't have good internet connection, that would be a subpar experience. So I think there's a lot of AI we would like to run on a device, and I think we will see it running on the device.
Right. So, one of the things we've talked about in the past is also running it in the browser. How does that differ from running it on the computer?
Running on the browser is a type of running on device. However, in the same way that a website effectively often executes on your device, but it is all downloaded at the time of putting in the URL for the most part, and executed then on your device very temporarily. So you're more restricted in what you can do in the browser, although that is getting better and better each day. But you can already load using some libraries out there like Onyx, AI models into the browser, and therefore you could enable if we go with image detection, you can have a web app now that can detect, faces in an image or whatever that's running inside the browser. So as you take that on a plane again, it will continue to work. But also, you can be rest assured that your data isn't being sent to of the cloud. If you want to do image enhancement, you don't necessarily want to send it off to someone's server in some unknown country. And so it creates this opportunity to use something transiently. You don't need to install it on your computer ahead of time, but it is then run on your computer temporarily.
Right. Okay. Well, it'd be interesting if we get any questions or comeback. I'm just going to tell people quickly how they can just do what I did following your instructions. Well, you go to LM Studio and download it. Once you set it up and register, it shows you a list of available models. One of the available models is Llama from Meta. You can download that and be running a large language model on your computer, probably in 10 minutes from start to finish. Something like that, maybe depending a bit on your download and setup speed. I'm running it on a Mac, other people are running it on Windows, and I think it runs on Linux too, or Linux.
Absolutely, yes, it runs on Linux too. We'll share a link to LM Studio to make sure people can find the correct one. There may be other products out there that's called LM Studio. Couple of pieces of advice when setting it up. Accept the defaults unless you're an expert in understanding your computer and AI. Accept the defaults. And when choosing a model, as you say, Llama is a good place to start. And you will often see things like 7B or 70B. These are the parameters, stands for billion. I'd always recommend starting with a smaller number of B to begin with, because that will download much faster and execute much more quickly. If you download the 70B version, you might find you need 3 hours of download time, and it would take quite a lot to get it running on your computer.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to run something with a big model with maybe chain of thinking locally, it's going to take a long time to do the runs.
Well, that's a wrap for today. So thanks, Will, and we look forward to bringing you another topic shortly.